Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway of Carnegie Hall. The wheels made a soft, squeaking sound on the shiny floor. It was early morning, and the famous concert hall was quiet. Soon, hundreds of people would fill the seats to listen to beautiful music. But for now, Maria was alone with her mop and bucket. She had been working at Carnegie Hall for 8 years. Every day she came in before sunrise to clean the stages, the seats, and the hallways. She wiped down the pianos and polished the floors until they sparkled. Maria took pride in her work, even though some people looked down on her because she was just a cleaning lady. Maria was 42 years old and had come to New York from the Philippines 15 years ago. She remembered the day she left her home country. She was young then, full of hopes and dreams. She carried only one small suitcase and a heart full of courage. America was supposed to be the land of opportunity, where anyone could make their dreams come true. Back in the Philippines, Maria had grown up in a small house with her grandmother, Lola Rosa. The house was simple, with wooden walls and a tin roof that made music when it rained. In the corner of their tiny living room sat an old upright piano. The piano was older than Maria herself. Its black paint was chipped, and some of the white keys had turned yellow with age. Lola Rosa had taught Maria to play that old piano when she was just 5 years old. Maria's little fingers could barely reach the keys at first, but Lola Rosa was patient. She would sit beside Maria on the wooden bench and guide her hands. "Music comes from the heart, not from the fingers," Lola Rosa would say in her gentle voice. "Feel the music inside you and let it flow out through your hands," Maria learned quickly. She had a gift for music that surprised everyone in their small town. By the time she was 10, she could play songs just by listening to them once. She did not need to read music from paper. The melodies would go into her ears and somehow find their way to her fingers. Every evening after school, Maria would sit at the old piano and play. She played sad songs when she missed her parents, who had died when she was very young. She played happy songs when the sun was shining and the birds were singing outside. She played gentle lullabies that made the neighborhood children stop and listen through the open windows. The people in their town would often gather outside Maria's house just to hear her play. They said she had magic in her fingers. They said the old piano sounded like a brand new instrument when Maria played it. Even the local priest would sometimes ask Maria to play during church services. Lola Rosa dreamed that Maria would become a famous pianist one day. She saved every peso she could to pay for Maria's music lessons with the town's only piano teacher. But the lessons were expensive, and Lola Rosa worked many jobs to afford them. She cleaned houses, sold vegetables in the market, and washed clothes. For other families, when Maria turned 16, Lola Rosa became very sick. The doctor said she needed expensive medicine and treatment. Maria knew what she had to do. She stopped taking piano lessons and started working to help pay for her grandmother's medical bills. She worked in stores, cleaned offices, and did whatever job she could find. For 2 years, Maria barely touched the piano. Her hands became rough from cleaning and hard work. But at night, when Lola Rosa was sleeping, Maria would sometimes sit at the piano and play very softly. She did not want to wake her grandmother, but she could not stop the music that lived inside her heart. When Lola Rosa died, Maria felt like a part of her own heart had died too. The old piano sat silent in the corner of the house. Maria could not bear to play it anymore. Every song reminded her of her grandmother's gentle smile and encouraging words. A few months later, Maria made the difficult decision to leave the Philippines. She had a cousin in New York who said there were many job opportunities there. Maria sold everything she owned, including the old piano. She used the money to buy a plane ticket to America. When Maria first arrived in New York, the city seemed huge and scary. The buildings were so tall they seemed to touch the sky. The streets were full of cars and people rushing everywhere. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry, and no one had time to stop and talk. Maria's cousin helped her find a small apartment in Queens. It was tiny, with just one room and a bathroom she shared with other tenants. But it was hers, and she was grateful. She quickly found work cleaning office buildings at night. The pay was not much, but it was enough to survive. For years, Maria worked different cleaning jobs around the city. She cleaned banks, restaurants, and hotels. She worked hard and saved money whenever she could. Sometimes she would walk past music stores and see beautiful pianos in the windows. Her heart would ache with longing, but she knew she could never afford such expensive instruments. One day, Maria saw a job advertisement for a cleaning position at Carnegie Hall. She had heard of the famous concert hall, but she had never been inside. When she applied for the job, the manager was impressed by her hard work history and hired her immediately. On her first day at Carnegie Hall, Maria felt like she was entering a magical palace. The ceilings were high and decorated with beautiful paintings. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks. And everywhere she looked, she saw traces of the musical magic that happened in this place. But it was when Maria first saw the grand pianos that her heart nearly stopped beating. These were not like the old upright piano from her childhood. These were magnificent instruments, black and shiny like mirrors. They were huge and elegant, and Maria could imagine the beautiful sounds they could make. At first, Maria was afraid to even touch the pianos while cleaning them. They looked so expensive and important. But as days passed, she became more comfortable. She would carefully dust the keys and polish the wood until it gleamed. Sometimes, when she was sure no one was watching, she would gently press one key, just to hear the pure, clear sound it made. During her lunch breaks, Maria would sometimes sit in the empty concert hall and listen to musicians practicing. She would close her eyes and remember the feeling of playing music herself. The memories were both wonderful and painful. She missed music so much it hurt, but she had learned to push those feelings down deep inside her heart. Maria told herself that this job was enough. She was lucky to work in such a beautiful place, surrounded by music even if she could not play it herself. She convinced herself that just being near the pianos and hearing the rehearsals was a gift. She tried not to dream of playing again, because dreams could be dangerous for someone in her position. Every morning, Maria would arrive at Carnegie Hall before the sun came up. She would unlock the doors and turn on the lights. Then she would begin her work, cleaning and preparing the halls for another day of musical magic. She had become invisible, just another part of the building's daily routine. But deep inside her heart, in a place she tried to keep locked away, the music still lived. It waited quietly, like a seed buried in dark soil, ready to grow again if given the chance. Maria did not know that very soon her carefully ordered world was about to change, in ways she could never imagine. It was a Tuesday morning in October when everything changed for Maria Santos. She was cleaning the main concert hall as usual, wiping down the seats one by one. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, making patterns of light and shadow on the red carpet. Maria hummed quietly to herself as she worked. Old Filipino song her grandmother used to sing. At exactly 10 o'clock, the front doors of Carnegie Hall burst open. A group of people rushed in, talking loudly and moving fast. Maria looked up from her cleaning to see what was happening. In the center of the group was a tall man with long black hair and expensive clothes. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than Maria made in 3 months. This was Viktor Petrov, the famous Russian pianist. Maria had heard his name many times over the years. His concerts at Carnegie Hall always sold out completely. People would pay hundreds of dollars just to hear him play. Music critics called him a genius. Some said he was the best pianist in the world. Victor walked into the concert hall like he owned the place. His shoes clicked loudly on the floor as he moved toward the stage. Behind him followed his manager, his assistant, 2 photographers, and a reporter from a famous music magazine. Everyone seemed excited and nervous at the same time. Maria quickly moved her cleaning supplies out of the way and tried to make herself invisible. She had learned over the years that famous musicians did not like to be disturbed by cleaning staff. She picked up her spray bottle and cloth and moved to clean the seats in the back row, hoping no one would notice her, but Victor noticed everything. He had sharp eyes that seemed to see every detail around him. As he walked toward the stage, he looked around the concert hall like he was inspecting it. His face showed that he was not completely happy with what he saw. "The lighting is too bright," Victor said to his manager in a loud voice. "And why is there dust on the piano bench?" "I specifically requested that everything be perfect for today's photo shoot." Maria felt her cheeks turn red with embarrassment. She had cleaned the piano bench that morning, but maybe she had missed some dust. She started to move toward the stage to fix the problem, but Victor's assistant quickly stepped in front of her. "Please stay back," the assistant said firmly. "Mr. Petrov needs complete quiet to prepare for his performance tonight." Maria nodded and stepped back, but she felt hurt. She took pride in keeping Carnegie Hall clean and beautiful. She worked hard every day to make sure everything was perfect for the musicians and audience members. It was not fair for Victor to complain about her work in front of all these people. Victor climbed the steps to the stage and walked over to the beautiful, black grand piano. It was a Steinway, one of the finest pianos in the world. Maria had polished it carefully that morning until it shined like a mirror. She knew every curve and line of that piano because she cleaned it so often. The famous pianist sat down on the piano bench and stretched his fingers. He began to play a few scales, warming up his hands. The sound that came from the piano was incredible. Even these simple exercises sounded magical when Victor played them. Maria stopped cleaning and listened, unable to help herself. Victor's fingers moved across the keys like they were dancing. He played fast passages that sounded like water flowing over rocks. Then he played slow, beautiful melodies that made Maria think of her grandmother's lullabies. Despite his rude behavior, Maria had to admit that Victor was truly gifted. The photographer started taking pictures while Victor played. Camera flashes went off every few seconds, lighting up the stage like lightning. The reporter took notes. In a small notebook, writing down everything that happened. After a few minutes, Victor stopped playing and stood up from the piano bench. He walked around the stage, checking different angles and positions. He was preparing for his photo shoot, which would be used on posters and in magazines to advertise his concert that night. "The piano needs to be moved 2 feet to the left," Victor announced, "and bring in more flowers for the background. White roses, not yellow ones? Yellow roses are too common for an artist of my level." His assistant and the stage crew rushed to follow his instructions. They carefully moved the heavy piano and brought in large arrangements of white roses. Everything had to be exactly perfect. For Victor Petrov, while this was happening, Maria continued her cleaning work in the back of the concert hall. She tried to stay quiet and out of the way, but she could not stop listening to the conversations happening on stage. Victor was demanding and difficult with everyone around him. He complained about the temperature in the room, the position of the lights, and the color of the curtains. "This is why I only perform at the finest concert halls," Victor said loudly. To the reporter, "Most venues do not understand what it takes to present classical music properly. The staff here is adequate, I suppose, though they could use better training in how to prepare for world-class performances." Maria felt angry when she heard this. She and her fellow workers did their best every single day to make Carnegie Hall beautiful and welcoming for musicians and audiences. They worked hard for low pay and rarely received any recognition for their efforts. It was unfair for Victor to criticize them when he did not even know their names, but Maria said nothing. She needed this job to pay her rent and buy food. She could not afford to argue with famous musicians, no matter how rude they were. She just continued cleaning and tried to ignore the hurt feelings in her chest. The photo shoot continued for over an hour. Victor posed at the piano in dozens of different positions. Sometimes he pretended to play while looking dramatically into the distance. Other times he stood beside the piano with his arms crossed, trying to look serious and artistic. The photographer took hundreds of pictures during a break between poses. Victor walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the empty seats. His eyes scanned the concert hall until they landed on Maria, who was still cleaning quietly in the back rows. "You there?" Victor called out in a loud voice. "Cleaning lady." Maria looked up, surprised. Her heart started beating faster. She pointed to herself with a questioning look. "Yes, you," Victor said impatiently. "Come here for a moment." Maria put down her cleaning supplies and walked slowly toward the stage. She felt nervous with all the important people staring at her. Her hands shook slightly as she approached the group of well-dressed visitors. "What is your name?" Victor asked when Maria reached the front of the concert hall. "Maria Santos, sir," she answered quietly. "Maria Santos?" Victor repeated, as if testing how her name sounded. "How long have you worked here?" "8 years, sir," Maria replied. She wondered why this famous pianist was asking her questions. Maybe he wanted to complain about her cleaning work directly to her face. Victor smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the sort of smile that made Maria feel uncomfortable, like he was planning something she would not like. 8 years, Victor said, turning to address his entourage. 8 years of working around these beautiful pianos. I bet Maria here thinks she knows all about music by now. Don't you, Maria? Maria did not know how to answer. She sensed that this was some kind of trap, but she did not understand what Victor was trying to do. The other people in the group started to smile too, and Maria felt even more nervous. I just clean the instruments, sir, Maria said carefully. I do not know much about music. This was not completely true. Maria knew a great deal about music, and she missed playing piano every single day. But she had learned that it was safer to act humble and simple around important people. They seemed to prefer when working people did not have opinions or interests beyond their jobs. Victor laughed out loud at Maria's answer. It was not a pleasant laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made fun of someone instead of sharing joy with them. Of course you do not know about music, Victor said. Why would a cleaning lady understand the complexities of classical piano performance? That would be like expecting a janitor to understand brain surgery or rocket science. The reporter and photographers laughed along with Victor. Maria felt her face turn red with embarrassment and anger. She wanted to walk away, but her feet felt frozen to the floor. She had never been made fun of so publicly before. Victor was enjoying himself now. He had found a new way to entertain his audience, and Maria was his unwilling target. He walked closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at Maria like she was an amusing pet. "But you must have some opinions about music, Maria," Victor continued in a mocking tone. "After 8 years of dusting these pianos, surely you have developed some theories about how they should be played." Maria said nothing. She stared at the floor and wished she could disappear. She thought about her grandmother, who had always taught her to be proud of her musical gifts. But here in this moment, she felt small and worthless. The other people in Victor's group began to lose interest in this cruel game. The manager looked at his watch and reminded Victor that they had a schedule to keep. But Victor was not finished having his fun. "Actually," Victor said with a wicked gleam in his eyes, "I have a wonderful idea. Since Maria has spent so many years around these magnificent instruments, perhaps she would like to demonstrate her musical knowledge for us. What do you say, Maria? Would you like to show us how you think a piano should be played?" The silence in Carnegie Hall was so complete that Maria could hear her own heartbeat. Viktor Petrov stared at her with surprise. He had not expected the quiet cleaning lady to accept his cruel challenge. He had thought she would run away embarrassed, giving him and his friends a good laugh. But instead, Maria stood there looking directly at him with something new in her eyes. "Excellent," Victor said, clapping his hands together. His voice was loud and fake cheerful. "This should be very entertaining indeed. Please, come up onto the stage, Maria Santos. Let us see what you can do." Maria walked slowly toward the stage. Steps. Each step felt heavy, like she was walking through deep water. Part of her wanted to turn around and run away. She could say she felt sick, or that she remembered some urgent cleaning work that needed to be done. No one would stop her from leaving, but another part of Maria, a part that had been sleeping for many years, was finally waking up. This was the part that remembered sitting beside Lola Rosa at the old piano, learning to make beautiful music with her small hands. This was the part that had dreamed of playing on great stages for audiences who loved music. As Maria climbed the steps to the stage, more people began to enter the concert hall. Word had spread quickly through the building that something unusual was happening. Stage workers, security guards, and other staff members gathered in the back rows to watch. Some of the early VIP ticket holders who had come early to see the venue also stayed to see what was going on. Victor noticed the growing audience and became even more excited. He loved being the center of attention, and now he had created an unexpected show. He walked over to the piano and patted the bench like he was inviting a pet to come sit. "Here we are, Maria," Victor announced in his loud, theatrical voice. "This is a Steinway Model D concert grand piano. It costs more than most people make in 5 years. It has been played by the greatest pianists in history. And now you are going to show us how a cleaning lady thinks it should be played." Some people in the growing audience laughed nervously. Others looked uncomfortable, sensing that something mean was happening. But no one tried to stop what was about to occur. Maria walked across the stage toward the piano. The bright lights made her feel dizzy, and she could feel dozens of eyes watching her every movement. Her cleaning uniform felt shabby and wrong on this elegant stage, where famous musicians wore beautiful gowns and expensive suits. When she reached the piano, Maria stopped and looked at it carefully. This was the same instrument she cleaned every morning, but now it seemed different. Now it was not just a piece of furniture to be polished. It was a doorway back to the music that lived in her heart. "Well," Victor said impatiently, "we are all waiting. Please sit down and begin your performance." Maria pulled out the piano bench and sat down slowly. The bench was the perfect height, adjusted earlier for Victor's photo shoot. She placed her hands in her lap and looked at the keys in front of her. These were the same keys she dusted carefully every day, but she had not actually played them for 8 long years. The audience was getting larger. People kept coming into the concert hall to see what was happening. Some took pictures with their phones. Others whispered to each other, wondering who this woman was and why she was sitting at the piano in a cleaning uniform. Victor walked to the side of the stage, where everyone could see him clearly. He crossed his arms and smiled his mean smile, waiting for Maria to embarrass herself. The photographer raised his camera, ready to capture whatever disaster was about to happen. "Anytime you are ready, Maria," Victor called out. "We are all very eager to hear your interpretation of classical music." Maria closed her eyes and tried to remember what Lola Rosa had taught her so many years ago. "Music comes from the heart, not from the fingers," her grandmother had said. "Feel the music inside you and let it flow out through your hands." For a moment, Maria was not sitting on a stage in front of strangers who expected her to fail. She was back in her childhood. Home in the Philippines, sitting beside her beloved grandmother at the old upright piano. She could almost smell the tropical flowers outside the window and feel the warm breeze on her face. Maria placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool and smooth under her fingers. She pressed down gently on middle C, just to hear the pure, clear sound. The note rang out beautifully in the quiet concert hall. "Ah, she knows where middle C is," Victor said sarcastically. "Very impressive. Perhaps next she will play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star for us." A few people laughed, but the laughter sounded forced and uncomfortable. Most of the audience was just watching and waiting to see what would happen next. Maria ignored Victor's cruel words. She thought about the song she wanted to play. It was the lullaby her grandmother had taught her when she was very young. In Filipino, it was called Sa Yugoy ng Diyan, which meant in the swing of the cradle. It was a gentle, beautiful song that mothers sang to help their babies sleep. This song held all of Maria's memories of love and family and home. It reminded her of everything she had lost when she came to America and everything she still carried in her heart. If she was going to play music again after all these years, this was the song she wanted to play. Maria began very softly, playing just the simple melody with her right hand. The notes floated through the concert hall like whispered secrets. The song was slow and gentle, full of tenderness and longing. At first, the audience seemed confused. This was not what they had expected to hear. The melody was unfamiliar to most of them, and Maria was playing so quietly that people had to strain to hear it. Some people moved closer to the stage to listen better. Victor looked annoyed. This was not going the way he had planned. He had wanted Maria to play something badly so everyone could laugh at her. Instead, she was playing something strange and sad that was making people pay attention in a way he did not like. "Louder!" Victor called out. "If you are going to perform, you need to project to the back of the hall. This is Carnegie Hall, not your living room." Maria heard Victor's voice, but she did not change what she was doing. She continued playing the lullaby softly, letting the melody tell its own story. She added her left hand now, playing gentle harmony. Underneath the main tune, something magical began to happen. As Maria played, her hands remembered things her mind had forgotten. Muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice came flooding back. Her fingers found their way around the keys like they were coming home after a long journey. The song began to grow and change. Maria started to add small decorations to the melody, little grace notes and trills that made the simple tune more beautiful. She played with the rhythm, sometimes slowing down and sometimes speeding up to express different emotions. The audience grew quieter. People stopped whispering and taking pictures. They stopped looking at their phones and checking the time. Something was happening on stage that commanded their full attention. Maria was no longer just playing the lullaby the way her grandmother had taught her. She was making it into something new and personal. She wove in memories of rainy nights in the Philippines, of working late hours in New York, of missing her family and dreaming of better days. Victor's smile began to fade. This was not going according to his plan at all. The cleaning lady was not embarrassing herself. Instead, she was playing music that was actually good. Very good. More people continued to enter the concert hall. Security guards, office workers, and early ticket holders all gathered to listen to the unexpected performance. The crowd was getting larger by the minute, and everyone seemed captivated by what they were hearing. Maria felt the music flowing through her like a river that had been dammed for too long. All the songs she had not played, all the emotions she had not expressed, all the dreams she had pushed down deep inside her heart, were finally finding their way out through her fingers. She began to play louder, as Victor had demanded, but not in the way he had meant. The volume came from passion, not performance. The music filled the concert hall with warmth and longing and hope. The simple lullaby was becoming something magnificent. Maria added complex harmonies in the left hand while her right hand sang the melody with increasing confidence. She played runs and scales that decorated the tune like flowers decorating a garden. Victor's assistant leaned over and whispered something in his ear. The photographer lowered his camera, forgetting to take pictures. The reporter stopped writing in his notebook and just listened. In the audience, people began to have strong emotional reactions to Maria's playing. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others closed their eyes and let the music wash over them. A few people in the back rows sat down in the seats, settling in to listen more comfortably. Maria was not aware of any of this. She was lost in the music, remembering what it felt like to express herself through sound. She thought of her grandmother's gentle hands guiding her fingers when she was small. She thought of the old piano with its chipped paint and yellow keys that had somehow produced such beautiful music. The lullaby reached its climax, with Maria playing a soaring melody high on the keyboard while her left hand provided a rich, complex foundation. The sound filled every corner of Carnegie Hall, reaching into the hearts of everyone who heard it. Then gradually, Maria brought the song back down to its quiet beginning. The applause washed over Maria like warm rain after a long drought. She sat at the piano bench, trembling slightly, hardly believing what had just happened. For 8 years, she had cleaned this very piano every morning, polishing its surface, until it gleamed. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined that she would one day sit here and play for an audience at Carnegie Hall. The clapping continued for what felt like forever. People in the audience were not just politely applauding. They were clapping with real enthusiasm, with joy, with surprise at what they had just witnessed. Some people stood up from their seats. Others wiped tears from their eyes while they clapped. Maria looked out at all the faces staring back at her. These were the same people who had walked past her for years without really seeing her. Music critics, wealthy patrons, famous musicians. and important business people. But now they were looking at her with respect and wonder. Viktor Petrov still stood at the side of the stage, but his expression had completely changed. The mean smile was gone from his face. His arms were no longer crossed in an arrogant pose. Instead, he looked confused and uncomfortable, like someone who had just been taught a lesson he was not ready to learn. The applause began to die down, and the audience waited to see what would happen next. Maria slowly lifted her hands from the piano keys and placed them in her lap. She felt like she was waking up from a beautiful dream. That was ... Victor began to speak, then stopped. He seemed to have trouble finding the right words. That was not what I expected. Maria looked at him quietly. She was no longer afraid of this famous pianist. Something had changed inside her. During those few minutes of playing, she had remembered who she really was underneath her cleaning uniform and her quiet, humble manner. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Victor asked. His voice was different now, not mocking or cruel like before. He sounded genuinely curious. "My grandmother taught me," Maria answered simply, "in the Philippines when I was a child." "Your grandmother was a piano teacher?" Victor asked. "No," Maria said, shaking her head. "She was just a woman who loved music. She learned to play from her mother, and her mother learned from her mother. The music was passed down in our family like recipes or stories." Victor walked closer to the piano. He moved differently now, not strutting like a peacock showing off his feathers. He seemed smaller somehow, more human. "But you have never had formal training?" Victor continued asking questions. "No conservatory education? No professional lessons?" "I took some lessons when I was young," Maria explained. "But we could not afford many. My grandmother became sick, and I had to stop music to work and help pay for her medicine." The audience listened to this conversation in fascination. Many of them had spent years studying music in expensive schools. They had private teachers and attended master classes and competitions. The idea that someone could play so beautifully with so little formal training was amazing to them. Victor ran his hand through his long black hair. He looked troubled, like someone who was questioning everything he thought he knew about music and talent. "The song you played?" Victor said. "I have never heard it before. What was it called?" "Sa Yugay Ngdn," Maria replied. "It means in the swing of the cradle. It is a Filipino lullaby. My grandmother sang it to me when I was small, and later she taught me to play it on the piano." "It was beautiful," said a woman's voice from the audience. Everyone turned to look. It was Margaret Chun, one of the most respected music critics in New York. She had attended hundreds of concerts at Carnegie Hall and had heard all the greatest pianists in the world. Truly beautiful. Other people in the audience began to murmur their agreement. They had been moved by Maria's simple song in a way that surprised them. Many of them attended concerts every week, but it had been a long time since they had heard music that touched their hearts so deeply. Victor looked around at the audience, seeing their faces full of genuine emotion. As a professional performer, he knew the difference between polite applause and real appreciation. What he was seeing now was absolutely real. "Play something else," Victor said suddenly. "Please, I would like to hear more." Maria was surprised by this request. She looked at Victor's face and saw that he was serious. The cruelty was gone from his eyes, replaced by something that looked like curiosity and perhaps even respect. "I do not know many pieces," Maria said honestly. "I only remember the songs my grandmother taught me and some things I learned by listening to musicians practice here at the hall." "Then play something you learned by listening," Victor said. "Play whatever you want." Maria thought for a moment. Over the years of working at Carnegie Hall, she had heard thousands of hours of music. She had listened to rehearsals and sound checks from the back of the concert hall while she worked. Some melodies had stuck in her memory, and sometimes she would hum them while she cleaned. There was one piece that she had heard many times, a beautiful melody by Chopin. She did not know its official name, but the musicians who practiced it always seemed to play it with such feeling. Maria had memorized it just by listening, though she had never tried to play it herself. "I know a piece by Chopin," Maria said. I do not know what it is called, but I heard it many times during rehearsals. Chopin? Victor raised his eyebrows in surprise. Chopin was one of the most difficult and sophisticated composers for piano. His music required great technical skill and deep musical understanding. Please, Victor said, gesturing toward the keyboard. Show me. Maria placed her hands on the keys again. She closed her eyes and remembered the melody as she had heard it, played by various musicians over the years. Some had played it fast and flashy, showing off their technical skills. Others had played it slowly and romantically, emphasizing its emotional beauty. Maria decided to play it the way it sounded in her heart. She began with the gentle opening melody, letting each note ring clearly in the quiet hall. This was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, though Maria did not know its name. She only knew that it was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at the same time. As she played, Maria added her own interpretation to the music. She had learned the basic melody by listening, but now she was making it her own. She played some passages faster than she had heard them, creating excitement and energy. Other sections she played very slowly, allowing each note to carry maximum emotional weight. Victor watched Maria's hands as she played. He was amazed by what he saw. Her technique was not perfect in the classical sense. She had some fingering that a formal teacher would correct, but her musical instinct was extraordinary. She seemed to understand the emotional heart of the music. In a way that many trained pianists never achieved, the audience was completely captivated. This cleaning lady was playing one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire, and she was playing it with real artistry. She had learned it just by listening, without sheet music or formal instruction. As the nocturne continued, Maria became more confident. She added decorative runs and trills that made the melody even more beautiful. She played with the rhythm, sometimes rushing forward with passion and sometimes holding back to create tension and suspense. The music filled Carnegie Hall with its bittersweet beauty. People in the audience forgot about their busy schedules and important meetings. They forgot about their social positions and their expensive clothes. They were simply human beings listening to beautiful music, and they were moved by what they heard. Victor found himself thinking about his own musical journey. He had started piano lessons when he was 4 years old. He had attended the best music schools and studied with famous teachers. He had won competitions and received awards and recognition from around the world. But when had he last played music with the pure joy and honesty that he was seeing in Maria? When had he last forgotten about technique and criticism and just let his heart speak through his fingers? He could not remember. Maria reached the climax of the nocturne, playing the soaring melody with passion and power. Her hands moved across the keyboard with growing confidence, and the music seemed to lift everyone in the room up into something larger than themselves. Then, like a gentle sunset, the music began to wind down. Maria played the final phrases very softly, letting the melody fade away like a beautiful memory. The last note hung in the air for a long moment before dissolving into silence. This time, the applause came immediately. It was even stronger than before. People clapped and cheered and called out words of appreciation. Some stood up and applauded with their hands held high above their heads. "Bravo!" Someone shouted from the balcony. "Magnificent! More!" called another voice. "Please play more." Maria sat at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. She had never experienced anything like this in her life. For 8 years, she had been invisible at Carnegie Hall. Now, suddenly, she was the center of attention, and people were celebrating her music. Victor approached the piano slowly. His face showed a mixture of emotions that Maria could not quite read. When he reached the bench where she was sitting, he stopped and looked at her for a long moment. "Maria Santos," Victor said quietly, so only she could hear him above the continuing applause. "I owe you an apology." Maria looked up at his face in surprise. She had not expected this proud, famous man to apologize to a cleaning lady. Maria looked out at the audience one more time before deciding what to play. The concert hall was now completely full. Word had spread throughout Carnegie Hall that something extraordinary was happening, and people had come from every corner of the building to listen. Security guards, office workers, musicians, critics, and early concert-goers, all crowded together in the seats and aisles. She decided to play something that would tell her complete story. Not just one song, but a musical journey that would show everyone how she had traveled from her childhood in the Philippines to this moment on the stage at Carnegie Hall. Maria began with a simple melody that her grandmother had taught her when she was very young. It was a traditional Filipino folk song about a farmer working in the rice fields. She played it exactly as Lola Rosa had shown her, with basic chords and a gentle rhythm. But then, slowly, Maria began to transform the song. She added harmonies that she had learned by listening to jazz musicians during late-night rehearsals. She wove in classical techniques that she had absorbed from years of hearing great pianists practice. The simple folk melody became the foundation for something much more complex and beautiful. As she played, Maria was telling the story of her life through music. The peaceful beginning represented her happy childhood with her grandmother. Then, the music became more turbulent, showing the sadness of Lola Rosa's illness and death. There were angry, harsh chords that expressed Maria's frustration with poverty and the pain of leaving her homeland. The audience listened in amazement as Maria's playing grew more sophisticated by the minute. She was not just playing notes on a piano. She was creating a living, breathing work of art that combined different musical traditions in ways no one had ever heard before. Victor stood at the side of the stage, completely absorbed in what he was hearing. As a professional musician, he could recognize the incredible complexity of what Maria was doing. She was improvising at a level that most trained pianists could never achieve. She was combining Filipino folk music, classical techniques, jazz, harmonies, and her own emotional experiences into something entirely new. But it was not just the technical skill that impressed Victor. It was the honesty and authenticity of Maria's playing. Every note came from a real place in her heart. She was not trying to impress anyone or show off her abilities. She was simply sharing her truth through music. The music continued to evolve, and Maria began to incorporate melodies she had heard during her years at Carnegie Hall. She played fragments of Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, and other great composers, but she played them in her own style, filtered through her own experiences and emotions. A Beethoven melody became a lament for all the dreams she had given up. A Mozart phrase turned into a celebration of the small joys she had found in her daily work. She took these famous pieces of classical music and made them part of her own story. People in the audience began to cry openly. They were not crying from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of what they were experiencing. Maria's music was reaching into places in their hearts that they had forgotten existed. Margaret Chun, the respected music critic, found herself thinking about her own childhood piano lessons. She remembered the pure joy she had felt when she first learned to make music, before it became her job to analyze and criticize performances. Maria's playing was reminding her of that lost innocence and wonder. A wealthy businessman in the front row thought about his mother, who used to sing lullabies to him when he was small. He had not thought about those songs for 30 years. But Maria's music brought the memories flooding back with surprising power. A young music student who was working part-time as an usher realized that she had been so focused on technique and competition that she had forgotten why she loved music in the first place. Maria's performance was showing her what real artistry looked like. As the improvisation continued, Maria began to play with even more freedom and creativity. She used the entire keyboard from the lowest bass notes to the highest treble, creating sounds that ranged from thunderous and powerful to delicate and whisper-soft. She played rapid scales that sounded like water cascading down a mountain. She played gentle arpeggios that felt like sunlight filtering through leaves. She created rhythms that made people want to dance and melodies that made them want to cry. Victor watched Maria's hands as she played, studying her technique with professional interest. Her fingering was unconventional, but it worked perfectly for her style of playing. She had developed her own way of approaching the keyboard that was uniquely hers. More importantly, Victor could see that Maria was completely lost in the music. She was not thinking about the audience or worrying about making mistakes. She was in a state of pure musical expression, letting the sounds flow through her like a river finding its way to the sea. This was something Victor had not experienced in years. His own performances had become calculated and careful, designed to impress critics and win applause. He had forgotten what it felt like to play music simply because it needed to be played. As Maria's improvisation reached its climax, she brought together all the different musical elements she had introduced. The Filipino folk melody, the classical techniques, the jazz harmonies, and her own emotional journey all combined into one powerful, unified statement. The music built to a tremendous crescendo that filled Carnegie Hall with sound. Every person in the audience felt the power of that moment in their own way. Some felt inspired to pursue their own creative dreams. Others felt grateful for the reminder that beauty still existed in the world. Then, gradually, Maria began to bring the music back to where it had started. She returned to the simple Filipino folk melody, but now it was transformed by everything that had come before. It was the same song, but deeper and richer and more meaningful. The final notes were played very softly, like a prayer or a whispered secret. Maria's hands came to rest on the keys, and she sat quietly for a moment. Returning from the musical journey she had just taken, the silence that followed was profound. No one moved or spoke. The entire audience sat in stunned appreciation of what they had just experienced. They had witnessed something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Finally, one person began to applaud. Then another. Then the entire audience erupted in the most enthusiastic applause Carnegie Hall had heard in years. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering and calling out expressions of amazement and gratitude. Incredible! Someone shouted, "I have never heard anything like that." Called another voice, "More! Please play more!" But Maria knew that she had said everything she needed to say through her music. She had shared her complete story, from her childhood dreams to her present reality, and the audience had understood every note. She stood up from the piano bench and looked out at all the people applauding her. Their faces showed pure joy and appreciation. She had given them a gift, and they were giving one back to her through their enthusiastic response. Victor walked over to where Maria was standing. He had tears in his eyes, something that rarely happened to this sophisticated and worldly man. "Maria," Victor said, his voice thick with emotion, "what you just did, that was not just piano playing, that was pure artistry. That was music in its most honest and beautiful form." Maria smiled at him gratefully. "Thank you for asking me to play," she said. "I know you did not mean it as a kindness, but it became one anyway." Victor felt another wave of shame about his original intentions, but also gratitude for the unexpected lesson Maria had taught him. "I have a question for you," he said. "Would you consider playing with me tonight during my concert?" Maria looked at him in surprise. "You want me to perform with you? In front of your audience?" "Yes," Victor said firmly. "I think people need to hear what you have to offer. You have a gift that should be shared with the world." The audience, which had been talking excitedly among themselves, grew quiet when they heard Victor's proposal. They had all been thinking the same thing, that Maria's talent was too special to be hidden away. Maria felt overwhelmed by this unexpected opportunity. Just an hour ago, she had been cleaning floors and polishing furniture. Now, one of the world's most famous pianists was inviting her to perform with him at Carnegie Hall. "I do not have the right clothes," Maria said, looking down at her cleaning uniform. "I do not have sheet music. I have never performed with another musician before." "None of that matters," Victor said. "What matters is your music and your heart. Everything else can be arranged." Margaret Chun stood up from her seat in the audience. "Excuse me," she called out. "I would like to offer my help as well. I think the world needs to know about Maria's story and her incredible talent." Other people in the audience began to speak up, offering their assistance and support. A wealthy patron offered to provide appropriate concert attire. A music teacher offered to help with any technical preparation that might be needed. A recording engineer offered to capture the performance. Maria looked around at all these people who had been strangers just an hour ago. They were now offering to help her pursue the musical dreams she had given up so many years ago. It felt like a miracle, but also like something that was meant to happen. "I would be honored to play with you tonight," Maria said to Victor. Within minutes of Maria's impromptu performance ending, Carnegie Hall buzzed with an energy unlike anything the staff had ever seen. People were not leaving the building. Instead, they lingered in the lobby, in the hallways, and even in the concert hall itself, talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. "Did you record that?" one woman asked her friend urgently. "Please tell me someone recorded that." "I got the last part on my phone," another person replied, holding up their device. But the quality doesn't capture how incredible it really was. Margaret Chun, the music critic, was already on her phone with her editor at the New York Times. "You need to hold space on tomorrow's front page," she said in an excited voice. "I just witnessed something that will change how we think about talent and opportunity in classical music." Word spread beyond Carnegie Hall with amazing speed. People were texting their friends, posting on social media, and calling family members to tell them about the cleaning lady who had stunned a crowd with her extraordinary piano playing. "You will not believe what just happened at Carnegie Hall," read one typical message. "A janitor just gave the most beautiful piano performance I have ever heard. She made a room full of strangers cry with her music." Video clips from various phones began appearing online within the hour. The quality was poor and the sound was imperfect, but even these rough recordings captured enough of Maria's performance to amaze people who had not been there to hear it in person. Comments poured in from around the world. "This gave me chills. Who is this woman? I've been playing piano for 20 years and I could never play with this much emotion. This is what real music sounds like. She has more soul in her little finger than most concert pianists have in their entire body." Ugh. At Carnegie Hall, Maria found herself surrounded by people who wanted to talk with her. She felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but also deeply moved by the genuine warmth and excitement she saw in people's faces. A young music student approached her with tears still in her eyes. "Thank you," the student said simply. "You reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. I have been so worried about grades and competitions that I forgot about the joy." An elderly man who had attended concerts at Carnegie Hall for 50 years took Maria's hand in both of his. "My dear," he said with a shaky voice, "in all my years of listening to music, I have never been so deeply moved. You have a gift that comes from heaven itself." A mother with her teenage daughter explained that they had come early to see the venue before the evening concert. "My daughter has been taking piano lessons for 8 years, the mother said, but she was getting discouraged and wanted to quit. After hearing you play, she asked if we could go home right now so she could practice." The teenage daughter nodded enthusiastically. "You made the piano sound like it was singing," she told Maria. "I want to learn how to do that." These conversations continued for over an hour. People shared their own musical stories with Maria, telling her about instruments they used to play, songs their grandparents had sung to them, and dreams they had given up or forgotten. Maria's performance had awakened something in each person who heard it. Dr. James Williams, the artistic director of Carnegie Hall, had been in his office when he heard about the commotion in the main concert hall. He came down to investigate, and was amazed to find hundreds of people still gathered, all talking about a cleaning lady's piano performance. "Maria Santos," he said when he found her in the crowd. "I have been the artistic director here for 15 years, and I have never seen anything like this response to a performance." Dr. Williams was a distinguished man in his 60s who had dedicated his life to promoting classical music. He had presented the world's greatest pianists, violinists, and opera singers at Carnegie Hall, but he recognized that what had happened today was different from any formal concert he had ever organized. "Would you be willing to meet with me in my office?" Dr. Williams asked Maria. "I would like to discuss some possibilities for your future." Maria felt nervous about meeting with such an important person, but she agreed. As they walked through the halls toward his office, Dr. Williams explained what he had in mind. "What you did today was not just impressive piano playing," he said. "You created a moment of genuine human connection through music. That is the rarest and most valuable thing in the performing arts." In his office, which was decorated with posters from decades of famous concerts, Dr. Williams offered Maria a cup of tea and asked her to tell him about her musical background. As she shared her story, he listened with growing amazement. "You learned all of this by ear?" he asked. "Without formal training or sheet music?" "My grandmother taught me the basics," Maria explained. "But mostly I learned by listening and trying things on my own. When I started working here, I would hear the musicians rehearsing, and the melodies would stay in my head." Dr. Williams shook his head in wonder. "Do you realize how extraordinary that is? Most professional musicians struggle to memorize pieces, even when they have the sheet music. You absorb complex classical compositions just by listening to rehearsals." He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes bright with excitement. "Maria, I want to offer you something. We have a program here called Emerging Artists where we help talented musicians develop their careers. I would like to invite you to be part of this program." Maria's heart began to beat faster. "What would that mean?" "It would mean access to practice rooms, coaching with professional musicians, and opportunities to perform in smaller venues to gain experience. We would also connect you with potential sponsors who might be interested in supporting your musical education." Maria felt dizzy with the possibility of what Dr. Williams was describing. "But I'm just a cleaning lady," she said quietly. "You are a cleaning lady who happens to be one of the most naturally gifted musicians I have ever encountered," Dr. Williams corrected her. "Your job does not define your talent." Meanwhile, Viktor Petrov was in his dressing room, preparing for his evening concert, but he found it impossible to concentrate on his usual pre-performance routine. He kept thinking about Maria's playing and how it had affected him. His manager knocked on the door. "Victor, we need to discuss tonight's program. The hall is buzzing about what happened this afternoon. People are asking if the cleaning lady will be performing with you." Victor had been thinking about this very question. His original concert program consisted of technically challenging pieces designed to showcase his virtuosity. But after hearing Maria play, these pieces seemed cold and mechanical to him. "I want to change the program," Victor announced to his surprise manager. "Change it?" "Victor, we cannot change the program on the same day as the concert. The audience has expectations." "The audience just heard something that exceeded all their expectations," Victor replied. "I want to create a program that honors what Maria showed us today. I want to play music that comes from the heart, not just from technical training." His manager looked worried. "This is very risky, Victor. Your reputation is built on precision and technical excellence. Maybe it is time to build it on something more important," Victor said thoughtfully. Back in the concert hall, the crowd had finally begun to disperse, but the effects of Maria's performance continued to ripple outward. People who had been there were calling friends and family members, trying to describe what they had experienced. Sarah Mitchell, a music teacher from a nearby elementary school, had been in the audience during her lunch break. She returned to her classroom that afternoon with a completely new perspective on how to teach her students. "Today I learned something important," she told her class of 8-year-olds. "Music is not about playing all the notes perfectly. Music is about sharing your feelings and your story with other people." One of her students raised her hand. "But Mrs. Mitchell, you always tell us to practice until we get all the notes right." "Yes, practice is important," Sarah explained. "But the most important thing is to remember why we are making music in the first place. We make music to connect with other people and to express what is in our hearts." That afternoon, Sarah's students played their simple songs with more emotion and joy than they ever had before. They had been inspired by their teacher's excitement about the mysterious cleaning lady who had made beautiful music at Carnegie Hall. Similar conversations were happening throughout New York City. Music teachers talked to their students about authenticity versus technical perfection. Parents discussed with their children the importance of pursuing dreams despite obstacles. Office workers found themselves humming melodies and remembering instruments they used to play. Local news stations began picking up the story. A reporter from Channel 7 arrived at Carnegie Hall hoping to interview Maria, but she had already left for the day. Instead, they interviewed audience members who were still talking about the performance in the lobby. It was like hearing music. For the first time, one woman told the camera. She played with such honesty and emotion that it reminded me why music matters in the first place. I have attended hundreds of concerts in my life, said an elderly man who was a seasoned subscriber. But I will remember this impromptu performance longer than any official concert I have ever heard. The reporter also spoke with Viktor Petrov. As evening approached, Carnegie Hall began to fill with the regular audience for Viktor Petrov's scheduled concert. These were people who had paid significant money for their tickets, expecting to hear one of the world's most famous pianists perform a program of classical masterpieces. They had no idea that their evening was about to become something completely unexpected. Maria arrived back at Carnegie Hall 3 hours before the concert, carrying a small bag with the dress that Margaret Chun had arranged for her to borrow. It was a simple but elegant black dress that would be appropriate for performing on stage. Maria had never worn anything so fine in her entire life. In the small dressing room that had been provided for her, Maria changed out of her cleaning uniform and into the concert dress. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked like a professional musician, someone who belonged on the stage at Carnegie Hall, but Maria knew that clothes did not make the musician. What mattered was the music in her heart and her willingness to share it honestly with others. The dress was beautiful, but it was just a costume. Her real identity came from her grandmother's teachings and her own musical journey. Dr. Williams knocked on her dressing room door. "Maria, there are some people here who would like to meet you before the concert." In the hallway outside her dressing room, Maria found a small group of distinguished-looking people waiting for her. Dr. Williams introduced them one by one. "This is Mrs. Elizabeth Hampton, one of our most generous patrons. She has supported young musicians for over 30 years. Mrs. Hampton was an elegant elderly woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "My dear," she said, taking Maria's hands in hers, "what you did today was extraordinary. I would like to help you pursue your musical education in whatever way you need." "This is Professor David Chun from the Juilliard School," Dr. Williams continued. "He heard about your performance and came to hear you play tonight." Professor Chun was a serious man in his 50s who had trained many of the world's leading pianists. "I have heard about your natural ability," he said to Maria. "If you are interested, I would like to offer you a scholarship to study at Juilliard. You have talent that deserves proper development." Maria felt overwhelmed by these generous offers. A few hours ago, she could never have imagined that such opportunities would be available to her. "I do not know what to say," she replied honestly. "This morning I was just cleaning floors. Now you are offering me chances to study at the best music school in the world." "Talent does not care about your job or your background," Professor Chun explained. "What you have is a gift that appears perhaps once in a generation. It would be a tragedy if it were not properly nurtured." The third person Dr. Williams introduced was Robert Kim, a successful music producer who worked with classical recording labels. "I would like to make a recording of your music," he told Maria. "The world needs to hear what you can do with proper sound equipment and acoustics." As these conversations continued, Viktor Petrov appeared in the hallway. He had changed into his formal concert attire and looked every inch the international piano star. But his expression was different from that morning. The arrogance and coldness were gone, replaced by something that looked like humility and genuine respect. "Maria," Viktor said, "I wanted to speak with you before we perform together tonight." The small group stepped back to give them privacy for their conversation. Viktor led Maria to a quiet corner where they could talk without being overheard. "I have been thinking about what happened today," Viktor began, "and I realize that I owe you more than just an apology. I owe you gratitude." Maria looked at him with curiosity. Gratitude for what? For reminding me why I became a musician in the first place, Victor replied. When I started playing piano as a child in Russia, it was because the music made me feel something beautiful and important. Over the years, as my career became successful, I forgot about those feelings. I started focusing on technique, on impressing critics, on maintaining my reputation. Victor paused and looked directly into Maria's eyes. But when I heard you play today, I remembered what music is supposed to do. It is supposed to touch people's hearts and connect us to something larger than ourselves. You did that without any formal training, without expensive instruments, without a famous teacher. You did it with pure honesty and love for the music. Maria listened carefully to Victor's words. She could see that he was being sincere, that her performance had truly affected him in a deep way. I want to ask you something, Victor continued. When we perform together tonight, will you help me find that feeling again? Will you show me how to play with the same honesty that you showed today? I can try, Maria said gently. But I think you already know how. You just need to remember what the music means to you, not what it means to other people. As they talked, more people began to gather in the hallways around Carnegie Hall. Word had spread throughout New York City about the afternoon's extraordinary events, and many people had come hoping to witness whatever would happen next. Some audience members who had tickets for Victor's regular concert were confused about why there was so much excitement. They heard people talking about a cleaning lady who would be performing, but they could not understand what that meant. "Excuse me," one woman asked an usher, "is there some kind of special guest performer tonight? I thought this was supposed to be a solo recital by Viktor Petrov." The usher, who had been working at Carnegie Hall for many years, smiled with excitement. "Ma'am, you are about to witness something that no one expected. A woman who works here as a janitor gave an incredible piano performance this afternoon. She's going to play with Mr. Petrov tonight." The woman looked skeptical. A janitor playing at Carnegie Hall? That seems very unusual. Unusual does not begin to describe it, the usher replied. I have worked here for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like what happened today. This woman has a gift that will amaze you. Similar conversations were taking place throughout the venue. Some audience members were excited about the unexpected addition to the program. Others were concerned that their expensive tickets were not going to provide the performance they had expected. Margaret Chun, the music critic, was busy writing notes for her article. She had already spoken with her editor about expanding her review into a major feature story. This was not just a concert review. This was a story about talent, opportunity, and the power of music to transform lives. As the concert time approached, Maria felt her nervousness growing. Playing alone for an impromptu audience was one thing. Performing as part of a formal concert program was something entirely different. She had never played with another musician before, and she was worried about making mistakes in front of paying customers. Victor seemed to sense her anxiety. "Maria," he said, "remember that the audience tonight wants to hear your music. They are not here to judge you or find fault with your playing. They are here because they have heard about your gift, and they want to experience it for themselves." Dr. Williams appeared with a program for the evening's performance. He had worked with Victor to redesign the concert completely. Instead of the originally planned solo recital, the program would now feature both pianists performing separately and together. "We will begin with Victor playing some traditional classical pieces," Dr. Williams explained to Maria. "Then you will perform some of your own arrangements. Finally, you will both play together, improvising and creating music in the moment." Maria looked at the program and saw her name printed in elegant letters. Maria Santos, piano. Seeing her name on an official Carnegie Hall program felt like a dream that could not possibly be real. "Are you ready?" Victor asked as they heard the 5-minute warning announcement. Maria took a deep breath and thought about her grandmother Lola Rosa. She imagined her grandmother sitting in the audience, proud and smiling, encouraging her to play with all the love in her heart. "Yes," Maria said with growing confidence. "I am ready." As they walked toward the stage, Maria could hear the excited murmur of the audience beyond the curtain. She knew that many of these people had come specifically to hear her play, based on what they had heard about the afternoon's performance. That was both thrilling and terrifying. Victor paused just before they reached the stage entrance. "Maria, there is one more thing I want to tell you. My grandmother also taught me to play piano when I was very young. She was not a professional musician, just a woman who loved music and wanted to share it with her grandson." This revelation surprised Maria. She had imagined that Victor had always been surrounded by expensive teachers and formal training. "She taught me the same thing your grandmother taught you," Victor continued. "That music comes from the heart. I forgot that lesson for many years, but you helped me remember it today. Tonight, when we play together, we will be honoring both of our grandmothers and the love they gave us." As they stepped onto the stage together, Maria felt a sense of completion that she had never experienced before. She was no longer just a cleaning lady who used to play piano. She was no longer just someone with unfulfilled dreams. She was Maria Santos, musician, about to share her gift with the world on one of the most famous stages in existence. The concert that night became legendary in the history of Carnegie Hall. Victor began with a solo performance of Chopin's Ballade No. 1, but he played it differently than he had ever played it before. Instead of focusing on technical perfection, he played with the emotional honesty that Maria had inspired in him. The audience could hear the difference immediately. When Maria took the stage for her solo performance, the entire concert hall fell silent with anticipation. She had chosen to play the same Filipino lullaby that had started her musical journey that morning, but now she performed it with the confidence of someone who knew her worth as an artist. The melody filled Carnegie Hall with its gentle beauty, but Maria's arrangement was far more sophisticated than her morning improvisation. She had spent the afternoon thinking about the song and how to present it to a formal concert audience. She wove classical techniques into the traditional melody, creating something that honored both her heritage and her newfound artistic identity. As the lullaby developed, Maria began to incorporate themes from pieces she had heard Victor rehearse over the years. She took fragments of Beethoven, Mozart, and Rachmaninoff and blended them with her grandmother's simple song, creating a musical conversation across centuries and cultures. The audience listened in amazement as this formerly invisible woman transformed the stage into a space of pure musical magic. People who had attended thousands of concerts said later that they had never heard anything quite like it. When Victor joined Maria on stage for their duet, something unprecedented happened. These two musicians from completely different backgrounds and training found a way to create music together that neither could have made alone. Victor's classical technique combined with Maria's intuitive musicality to produce something entirely new. They improvised together, building musical conversations where Victor would introduce a classical theme and Maria would respond with her own interpretation, weaving in elements from her Filipino heritage. Then Maria would play a folk melody, and Victor would support it with harmonies that elevated the simple tune into something grand and universal. The audience was witnessing the birth of a new kind of music, one that crossed boundaries of class, culture, and training. It was democracy in action, showing that art belonged to everyone, not just those who could afford expensive education. When the final notes faded away, the standing ovation lasted for 15 minutes. People cheered, cried, and called for encore after encore. Music critics who had attended thousands of performances said they had never seen a response like this one, but the real transformation had already begun, and it extended far beyond that single evening. Margaret Chune's article in the New York Times the next morning was titled, "The Cleaning Lady Who Reminded Us What Music Really Means." The article was shared millions of times on social media and translated into dozens of languages. Maria's story became a symbol of hidden talent and the importance of giving everyone a chance to be heard. Within a week, videos of Maria's performance had been viewed by people around the world. Music teachers in schools everywhere used her story to encourage their students to play with more emotion and authenticity. The message was clear: technical perfection meant nothing without heart and soul. Professor Chun at Juilliard kept his promise and offered Maria a full scholarship. But Maria made a decision that surprised everyone. She chose to study part-time while continuing to work at Carnegie Hall. She wanted to remain connected to the place where her musical rebirth had occurred. "Education is important," Maria explained to reporters, "but I do not want to lose touch with the real world. My music comes from my life experiences, including my work as a cleaning lady. I want to keep learning from life as well as from books." Dr. Williams created a new position for Maria at Carnegie Hall, artist in residence. She would continue her cleaning duties in the mornings, but she would also teach music workshops, perform in small venues, and help other staff members discover their own hidden talents. Viktor Petrov's career took an unexpected turn as well. The collaboration with Maria had changed his approach to music completely. His subsequent performances became known for their emotional depth rather than just technical brilliance. He began seeking out opportunities to work with musicians from different backgrounds, creating fusion concerts that brought together classical, folk, and popular music traditions. More importantly, Victor started a foundation called Hidden Voices that provided music education and performance opportunities for working-class people who had never had access to formal training. Maria became the foundation's first recipient and later its artistic director. The most significant changes, however, occurred in the lives of ordinary people who had witnessed Maria's transformation or heard about it through the media. Sarah Mitchell, the elementary school music teacher, completely redesigned her curriculum to focus on emotional expression rather than technical perfection. Her students began performing with joy and confidence they had never shown before. Several went on to pursue music seriously. Inspired by Maria's example that talent could emerge from anywhere, a security guard at Carnegie Hall named James Washington, who had always dreamed of singing opera but thought he was too old and unqualified, auditioned for Victor's foundation program. He was accepted and began training with professional vocal coaches. Within 2 years, he was performing small roles with regional opera companies. Mrs. Hampton, the wealthy patron who had offered to support Maria's education, was so moved by the experience that she established a scholarship fund specifically for working-class musicians. She realized that the classical music world had been missing voices and perspectives that could only come from people with different life experiences. The story inspired countless other people to pursue creative dreams they had abandoned. A taxi driver in Chicago started a band. A nurse in Seattle began writing songs. A construction worker in Denver learned to play guitar. Maria's courage to share her gift had given others permission to explore their own hidden talents. 6 months after that transformative day, Maria gave her first solo recital at Carnegie Hall. The concert sold out within hours. But Maria insisted that a significant number of tickets be made available at low cost to working people who normally could not afford such events. The program for that recital included pieces by classical composers alongside traditional Filipino songs and Maria's own compositions. She had created a new category of music that honored both her heritage and her classical training. In the audience that night sat many of the people whose lives had been touched by Maria's story. Viktor Petrov was there, along with Dr. Williams, Professor Chun, and Margaret Chun, but Maria was most proud to see her fellow Carnegie Hall workers in the front rows, wearing their finest clothes and beaming with pride at their colleagues' success. Before she began playing, Maria spoke to the audience about her journey. 8 months ago, I believed that my dreams were too big for someone like me, she said. I thought that music was for other people, people with more education, more money, more advantages than I had. I was wrong. She looked out at the diverse audience, which included people from every background and walk of life. Music belongs to all of us, Maria continued. It does not care about your job, your income, or where you went to school. Music only cares about the honesty and love you bring to it. Each of you has your own song to sing, your own story to tell. Do not let anyone convince you that your voice does not matter. When Maria sat down at the piano and began to play, she thought about her grandmother Lola Rosa, who had planted the seeds of music in her heart so many years ago. She thought about the old piano with its chipped paint and yellow keys that had been her first teacher. She thought about all the years of cleaning floors and polishing instruments while dreaming of making music herself, but mostly, she thought about the miracle of second chances and the power of music to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. Her story had shown the world that talent could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that everyone deserved the opportunity to share their gifts. As the beautiful melodies filled Carnegie Hall, Maria Santos was no longer just a cleaning lady who happened to play piano. She was no longer just a pianist who happened to work as a cleaner. She was simply Maria Santos, musician, sharing her heart with the world and inspiring others to do the same. The transformation was complete. But the music would continue forever. Years later, when people talked about the day that changed Carnegie Hall, they remembered not just the beautiful music, but the lesson Maria had taught them all, that human dignity and artistic worth cannot be measured by social status or economic position. They remembered that everyone has value, everyone has gifts, and everyone deserves to be heard. Maria's legacy lived on in every person who found the courage to pursue their dreams despite obstacles, in every teacher who chose to focus on heart over technique, and in every institution that opened its doors wider to welcome voices that had previously been ignored. The cleaning lady who had been invisible for 8 years had become impossible to ignore, not because she demanded attention, but because she had something beautiful to offer the world. And in sharing her gift,